Hello friends, I am Nisha Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of English. The topic that we are going to discuss today is an analysis of the poem A Prayer for My Daughter, Part 1 by William Butler Yeats. In our previous lecture, we have made an introduction or we got a knowledge of what type of a poet was Yeats and what were the influences on him. And now we'll begin an analysis of his poem. First is the occasion. Why was this poem written? A Prayer for My Daughter is a poem by William Butler Yeats written in 1919 and published in 1921 as parts of Yeats' collection Michael Roberts and the Dancer. It is written to Anne, his daughter, with Georgie Hyde whom Yeats married after his last marriage proposal to Maud Gonne was rejected in 1916. About Maud Gonne we discussed in our previous lecture. Yeats wrote the poem while staying in a tower at Thurberley during the Anglo-Irish War, 2 days after Anne's birth on February 26, 1919. The poem reflects Yeats' complicated views on Irish nationalism, sexuality, and is considered an important work of modernist poetry. Now, the nature of the poem. The poem is a prayer-like poem, and it generally tells us about the poet's ideas about his daughter who is sleeping at the same time while the poem is being told. The poem by W.B. Yeats portrays how a father blessed with a daughter prays for the future happiness and well-being of her. The poet hopes that instead of growing up to be a woman of immense beauty, his daughter should be blessed with attributes of a virtuous and a great soul. She should be well-mannered and full of humility rather than being strongly opinionated to avoid any intellectual detestation that could drown her in misery. A Prayer for My Daughter by W.B. Yeats demonstrates concern and anxiety over the future well-being and prospects of his daughter Anne. He has written the poem in 1919, shortly after her birth in World War II. So, the ongoing unsettling feel is visible in the background and the poet's mind. Now comes the setting. The poem begins by describing Storm, which is a howling, and his newborn daughter sleeping half hid in her cradle and protected somewhat from the storm. The storm, which can in part be read as symbolizing the Irish War of Independence that overshadows the birth of Yeats' daughter and creates the political frame that sets the text into historical context. In stanza 2, the setting for the poem is revealed as being the tower, a setting for many of Yeats' poems, including the book of poems entitled The Tower. This is Thurberley, an ancient Norman tower in Galway, which Yeats had bought in 1917 and where he intended making a home. W.B. Yeats, in his 10th stanza poem, A Prayer for My Daughter, questions how best to raise his daughter. Though by 1919 the war was over, in Ireland it yet turned normal. So he ponders how she will survive the difficult times ahead in the politically turbulent times. The poem not only expresses the helplessness of Yeats as a father, but all father who had to walk through this situation. He wants to give his daughter a life of beauty and innocence, safety and security, He further wants her to be well-mannered and full of humility, free from intellectual hatred, and being strongly opinionated. Finally, he wants her to get married into an aristocratic family, which is rooted in spirituality and traditional value. Now, we'll make a stanza-wise summary and analysis. Prayer for My Daughter is a reflection of the poet's love for his daughter. It is also about surviving the turmoil of the contemporary world where passions have been separated from reason. The setting of the poem is unspecified. The speaker is the poet himself talking to his daughter. The tone is gloomy, precarious, frightening, as well as didactic. Now, the stanza 1. The poem opens with a description of the speaker praying for his innocent infant daughter and lying in the middle of a storm, howling and half hid. The poet says, once more the storm is howling and half hid under this cradle hood and coverlet my child sleeps on. There is no obstacle but Gregory's Wood and one bare hill, whereby the haystack and roof leveling wind, bred on the Atlantic, can be stayed. And for an hour I walked and prayed because of the great gloom that is in my mind. The poet demonstrates his feelings through the use of symbols of weather. The newborn baby girl is sleeping under this cradle hood and coverlet, implying the innocence and vulnerability of Anne. Though the external world is violent, she is protected from it. The storm is a metaphor for the Irish people's struggle for their independence, which was an uncertain political situation in Yeats' day. We can also say this storm in nature is symbolic of the storm that is raising in Yeats' mind, considering when he thinks about the welfare or about the future years of his daughter. He further presents the situation of the storm with roof leveling wind, representing turbulence in the midst of which the poet has walked and prayed for this young child and hour. Intense and threatening forces surround her like a flooded stream. The poet symbolizes the sea thus, out of the murderous innocence of the sea. Despite his apprehensions for his child in this turbulent world, he is hopeful for her. The child sleeps innocently amidst the howling storm outside, but Yeats couldn't settle down due to the storm inside. The storm howling symbolizes destruction, mentioned by the poet in his poem, The Second Coming. The wind bred in Atlantic has no obstacles except the estate of Lady Gregory, referring to the poet's patroness and a bare hill. The direct impact of the wind, meaning to the force of the outside world, especially on his daughter, worries the poet. The poem, A Prayer for My Daughter, opens with the image of child sleeping in a cradle but half hidden by its hood. The weather is a reflection of Yeats' feeling. The post-war period was dangerous. Anne's vulnerability and innocence is symbolized by cradlehood, coverlet, and half-lit shows that Anne is barely protected by the frail coverlet. Anne is oblivious to the violent forces around her. She is ignorant. She sleeps on. She is not awake to the violence around her. Hence, she is under this cradle hood which hides her and is unaffected. The forces may be riots, violence, starvation, or decay of moral values. Her ignorance protects her from the uneasy knowledge, hence she sleeps on. The roof leveling wind is strong, representing frightening turbulent forces, whereby the haystack and roof leveling wind bred on the Atlantic can be stayed. USA was more comfortable compared to Europe. Turbulent forces or wind was less significant and more controlled in the USA. Hence, it can be stayed or controlled. Yeats prays because he is glooming. He says, because of the great gloom in my mind. Thus, the tone of the poet is frightening, precarious, and gloomy. The literary devices which the poet has used in this stanzas are personification. The poet says the storm is howling. That represents threatening external forces, riots, evilness. Roof leveling wind represents turbulent forces. And the symbol storm represents outside forces which threaten ends safety. Cradlehood represents Anne's innocence and infancy. Covered lid represents innocence and ignorance, or to say frail protection. Wind represents turbulent forces. And the author may be mistaken, but Atlantic may be the United States of America. And the rhyme scheme in this stanza is A A B B C D D C. And now the stanza 2. In the second stanza of A Prayer for My Daughter, Yeats' worries about the future are further explained. He hears the sea screaming upon the tower, under the bridge, and elms above the flooded stream. The onomatopoeia word scream, onomatopoeia means the word which has the same sound as its meaning. The word scream and the flooded stream symbolize the poet's overwhelming anxiety for his daughter. Also, it refers to the great flood in the Bible. Due to his haunting fear, he imagines the future coming out of sea and dances to the frenzied drum, referring to war and bloodshed. In the last line, the poet employs paradox, murderous innocence, to contrast the world and his daughter, which also recalls the images of blood dimmed tide in the second coming. Yeats is worried about Anne. I walked and prayed for this young child an hour. The weather reflects the threatening forces he feared, and these forces flooded the stream. It is flooded because the troublemakers exist in large numbers or the forces are strong. The weather or external forces caused by the war are stormy and destructive. The elms are tossed due to the destructive forces. The tone is intense, anxious, frantic, and chaotic. This is rather desperate and pessimistic, but there is a shift of mood. Imagining. When Yeats starts to imagine, he helps his daughter. He decides how she should turn out. This appeases his worries and gives him new ideas and food for thought. He imagines how her future will be excitating. Imagining in reverie, the future years had come dancing to a frenzied drum. Ends life will pass in cows. Dancing to a frenzied drum also indicates the passing years in End's life, which are represented by drum beats, which also symbolize violence and chaos. It is violent and chaotic time. The drum is frenzied because of the danger and chaos around End. Furthermore, Yeats is excited for her to grow up. Anne's innocence is juxtaposed with the contrasting sea, which is murderous. The sea represents the world and the crowds around her, and as they are evil, destructive, and take advantage of her innocence, they are murderers. Moreover, the sea or the world is termed as murderous innocence because, as part of the sea, Anne's innocence is murderous to herself because it enables others to manipulate her. The poet has used symbols, sea wind, flooded stream, and personification. He says, future years have come dancing to a frenzied drum. There is use of paradox, or to say oxymoron, or juxtaposition. The poet says, murderous innocence of the sea. Sibilance, sea wind scream. Assonance, sea wind scream. Onomatopoeia, scream. Now stanza 3. In the third stanza, Yeats prays for his daughter to be gifted with beauty. At the same time, he doesn't want her beauty to distort or makes her dependent on her beauty for everything. Further, he says, let may she be granted beauty and yet not beauty to make a stranger's eye distraught or hers before a looking glass. For such being made beautiful overmuch, consider beauty a sufficient end. Lose natural kindness and maybe the heart revealing intimacy that chooses right and never finds a friend. So the poet implies the poet doesn't want her to become proud or vain, that she spends all day staring at the mirror and fails to have natural companionship. He implies too much beauty to be a dangerous one, that he wants her to be beautiful enough to secure a husband. Yeats hopes that N will be beautiful, but not excessively. Beauty is distracting and destructive because it causes an admirer to be distraught and unhappy as a result of this unfulfilled desire to possess this beauty. Besides, he may desire her negatively and steal her innocence. It inspires passion which may be hopeless. She should not be vain and conceited of her beauty. Yeats fears that beauty will make her think that it is sufficient for beauty would help her. Beautiful people being more attractive can benefit more, and with this attribute, N may think that she needs not perform acts of goodness, for her beauty is sufficient to place her in a position of security and acceptance. This causes her to lose natural kindness. She does not see or appreciate the values of kindness and virtue. She would think herself superior and strive less without helping others. They do not have to be kind and despise the physically undesirable. Furthermore, their beauty allows them to be fastidious in their choice of partners, having many admirers. Hence, they do not choose the right person as they have no heart or soul. They cannot love truly and care for veneer and shallow qualities, for they cannot truly feel or know who the one is they are sought for. The right person would in the end be more drawn to a good woman, as shown in stanza 5. Hearts are not had as a gift, but hearts are earned. Beauty obstructs friendship as being beautiful causes one to be condescending, malicious, and take things for granted. It causes the loss of human touch, for the beautiful may tend to boast and despise their inferiors. They are not true friends. In another perspective, they do not form true friendship because others befriend them for the benefits derived from their appearance and even take advantage of them. The beautiful do not pay attention to those who make true friends as they believe themselves superior in beauty, fashion, etc. Furthermore, excessive beauty results in jealousy and broken friendship. Another point to make is that beauty that over entices may decrease N's virtues and increase her vulnerability as others wish to use her. This is crucial, as in this poem, Yeats emphasizes the need for feminine innocence. In contrast, a plainer person, being on a lower hierarchy, will appreciate the importance of kindness. In this context, beauty is equated with society's shallowness. Thus, here the tone is imploring, beseeching. Beseeching is requesting, prayer like, reflective. Literary devices have been used, personification, symbol is stranger who is an unhappy admirer, alliteration. Now stanza 4. In Stanza 4 of A Prayer for My Daughter, Yeats substantiates his view on how excessive beauty has always been a source of trouble and destruction. The poet proves this fact by quoting examples from history and his own personal life. He turns to Helen in Greek mythology. She was considered to be the most beautiful woman on earth, brought the doom upon her and many others. The image of Helen evokes another figure, Aphrodite, who rose out of the spray. The union of Aphrodite with Hephaestus, Bendy-legged Smith, brings to mind the Morgon and McBride episode. It makes the poet wonder if the beautiful women eat something stupid for salad, that they make a stupid decision which brings misery forever. The rich horn of plenty is suggestive of courtesy, aristocracy, and ceremony that is lost by those women who make stupid decisions. Yeats speaks of Greek mythology. Helen of Troy, being the most beautiful woman in the world, married Paris, a stupid man. As she was greatly admired and revered for her beauty, life was boring with little strife. While that great queen that rose out of the spray, being fatherless, would have her way, yet chose a bandy-legged Smith format. It is referred to here, goddess Venus or Aphrodite has been referred. They were being fatherless and they could marry as she pleased with no parental authority. Yet, with all her power and advantages, chose a bandy-legged smith for men, Hephaestus. Hephaestus was God's iron smith, someone inferior to her. She had no father to guide her. Yeats intends to guide his daughter in the choice of a suitable spouse. Yeats is scornful. Cultured women make mad choices in spouses. Fine women eat a crazy salad with their meat. Meat is substantial, salad is not. Meat represents a fine lady who can be said to be substantial, having numerous qualities. The crazy salad is their dreadful mate who is devoid of many qualities. They can have more, but choose worse. The horn of plenty was a horn given by Zeus to his caretaker. The possessor of this horn would be granted his wishes. This is because Maud Gonne squandered her gifts of intellect, grace, and beauty, and the benefit she could command by marrying John McBride. She could obtain what she desired with these gifts, similar to the Horn of Plenty, and wasted the aforementioned gifts on McBride. As the Horn of Plenty could bring victuals, John McBride is symbolized as an unsubstantial salad. Maud Gonne wasted her supposed power. She could have done better for herself. Instead, she made the wrong choice or desire. Here, the poet has used Helen, Maud Gonne as symbol, and metaphor is crazy salad. Stanza 5. In the stanza 5, the poet continues with what he wants his daughter to possess more than mere beauty. He wants his daughter to learn to be compassionate and kind. When the poet talks about beauty, he is referring to Maud Gonne, and when he is talking about compassion and kindness, then he is talking about his wife, Georgie Heidi Lees. Many times, men who believe to love and loved by the beautiful women face disappointment compared to those found love in the modest yet compassionate women. Moreover, he says, modest and courteous people attract hearts than those with beauty, referring to his own marriage. Ultimately, he makes it clear that he wants his daughter to be an agreeable young woman than an arrogant beauty. Yeats wants Anne to be courteous. Love does not come freely and unconditionally. Hearts are not had as a gift, but hearts are earned. Love is not inspired by mere physical beauty. It is earned by good efforts, by those who are not entirely beautiful, who are kind and helpful. Those who have in stupidity made a fool of themselves by hopelessly loving beautiful women and thought it was reciprocated. Here he refers to himself. One may not be loved by a beautiful woman. Charm for a good woman has charmed a man eventually. He becomes wise by realizing the goodness of loving a good woman. Unsuccessful men have loved and are loved by kind women who make them happy yet are not beautiful. But her kindness made him glad. This could be a reference to Yeats' wife, Georgie Hydelis, who was not beautiful, but they had a happy marriage. Georgie loved him and let him take the credit for her work. The persona praises good, unbeautiful women like Georgie, who are more loved by men compared to harsh, beautiful ones. Maud. Stanza 6. In this stanza, Yeats continues to talk about his hopes and expectations for his daughter as she grew up. He wants her to be happy and content. He wants her to become a flourishing hidden tree, and her thoughts like a linnet, referring to its innocence and cheerfulness. Like a linnet, linnet is a bird. Like a linnet, he wants her to be satisfied in herself and infect others with her happiness, just as the birds when they sing, it expresses their happiness, but at the same time, the song of the bird makes other also happy. So he wants his daughter to be satisfied in herself and infect others with her happiness. He wants her to live like a laurel rooted in a particular place. The poet reveals his wish on his daughter being rooted in the tradition. From here onwards, more symbolism and interesting interpretation can be derived. Yeats hopes that his daughter will grow and flourish with virtue and modesty. May she become a flourishing hidden tree. A tree is fresh, soothing, and natural. He wants her to be calm, good natured, and natural, not over influenced by opinionated ideas. Yeats wishes that Anne will have merry, pleasant thoughts. He wants her to talk of good, pleasant things. The linnet is a bird which flies, representing a merry, sweet girl, not too serious, bombastic, and violent like Morgan. Yeats wants Anne to chase and quarrel only in merriment. He wants her to be happy and not be too ambitious or opinionated, nor but in merriment begin a chase, nor but in merriment a quarrel. He does not want her to chase. Chase is follow, ambition ruthlessly. The quarrel indicated is mere arguing for fun. Yeats wants Anne to have a solid home and talk be stable. Rooted in one dear perpetual place. The home is happy, hence it is dear. This may also indicate loyalty to one man. Morgan had consummated a relationship with Lucien Millevoye with two illegitimate children and gone on to marry John McBride. Yeats wants and to be constant to one man, unlike Morgan. Oh, may she live like some green laurel. Here Yeats used mythologies. The green laurel may refer to nymph Daphne, who was pursued by Apollo. Eager to protect her virtue, Daphne turned into a laurel tree. Similarly, Yeats wants Anne to be virtuous. Unlike Morgan, the word green in turn may symbolize peace, innocence, and youth. Anne's youth is not physical but mental. Her father wishes that she will be merry and young at heart. Why green, not red or brown? Russet or reddish brown? Because it is associated with autumn or middle age and decline. Maud will fade and has declined due to her non innocence. Her opinions do not denote one who is young at heart. Green denotes being young at heart. It also means inexperience or innocence, something merry, lively, and different, a welcome change. Yeats does not want his daughter to be dreary and old at soul. Maud is certainly experienced. He wishes for Anne's mental youth and innocence and vitality, also represented by the color green, for it may indicate evergreenness. Trees that are green are fresh and alive. Russet trees are dying and fading. Maud declines because she is experienced and deflowered. Her mental youth is gone. Hence, Anne is the opposite green. In being green, hopefully will retain mental youth with no worse change. Now, stanza 7. Yeats continues to talk about self-contentment women in stanza 7. He believes that kind, self-contained, traditionally rooted women are incorruptible. The poet considers hatred to be the cause of all evil and prays her to be left off that evil. Further, he believes that a soul free from hatred will preserve its innocence and hatred, just as the storm outside can't tear leaves from sturdy trees, turmoil and war can't break a strong woman. Yeats states that his mind does not benefit but has dried up of late or weakened, tired, and not stimulated because of the mind of Morgon, whom I have loved and whose beauty he admired dearly, prospers. He has mentioned her deficiencies. This weakens him. The sort of beauty that I have approved prosper but little. Suffering and destructive forces cannot destroy the fragile who do not hate as their minds are clear, calm, and free. Negative thoughts make us suffer. Now, stanza 8. In stanza 8 of A Prayer for My Daughter, the poet implores his daughter to shun passion and wild feelings that he considered as the weakness of beautiful women. She must be temperate because people who love deeply could hate deeply too. Hate destroys people and make them do cruel things, especially intellectual hatred, which is worst of all kinds. The poet reflects upon his emotional state when Morgan rejected him to marry John McBride. He wants his daughter to experience neither the disappointment nor hatred. With the hatred of an opinionated intellectual like Morgan is the worst because it is strong, destructive, and the person knows the reason for this hatred. The intellectual resists opposition and fights for this his cause. There are good reasons for this cause and hatred. Trivial hatred is weak, for there is little reason. An intellectual, being determined and clever, will fight for a cause with passion and determination. Yeats does not want Anne to be over opinionated, so let her think opinions are a curse. Yeats states that Maud Gonne had plentiful gifts, which she did barter, that horn and every good, for an old bellows full of angry men. The horn symbolizes gifts. The bellow depicts her strong opinions. It can also represent John McBride, who started a riot. Perhaps he could be said to be full of hot air or opinions, but little successful effort. And every good by quiet natures understood are her advantages, which are understood and appreciated by people with quiet natures. This makes sense, especially with McBride's loudness and abuse of his wife. The angry wind is despicable. Maud did not use her gifts properly, though she had courtesy, grace, ceremony, and aristocracy. The ninth stanza continues to describe the impact of hatred and benefits of staying away from hatred. Once hatred is driven out, the soul could recover its innocence. Then the soul would be free to explore and find that it is self delighting, self appeasing, and self affirming. According to the poet, the ideal woman makes everyone happy and comfortable despite all storms of misfortunes that come in her way. She is a strong pull for people around her, and her will would be that of heavens, for she has a clear mind. And in the last stanza of A Prayer for My Daughter, the poet expresses his final wish. He prays that his daughter to be married to a good husband who takes her to a home with aristocratic values and traditions. There he believes that neither arrogance nor hatred of common folks could be found, but morality and purity. Further, the poet does not want her to live a decadent life. He concludes by stating that his daughter would be rooted in spiritual values like a laurel tree. Thank you. In our next lecture, we will discuss a critical appreciation of the poem.